Hi, everybody. So great to have you here for another episode of Connect with KB. We are going to talk about business, education, leadership, and all the wonderful things that connect us to each other. This segment is brought to you by Marketing Resource Group, your full-service strategic communications firm, and the Aerospace Industry Association of Michigan. You can learn more about MRG at mrgmi.com. Aerodynamic Advisory is a boutique aerospace consulting firm specializing in aerospace strategy and growth, MRO, transaction support, customer satisfaction, and economic development. Aerodynamic works with the world's leading aviation and aerospace companies, from the very largest to small and mid-cap companies, and considers themselves as part of the industry, not outside consultants. They are headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan, and joining me today is Mike Stengel, Senior Associate, to share more about the commitment to Michigan and the COVID-19 impact on the aerospace industry. Mike, so great to have you with me. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kristin. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk a little bit about the Aerodynamic Advisory story. Can you share with me? You bet, yeah.
Yeah, so we are a boutique management consulting firm. We are headquartered in Ann Arbor, Michigan. We were founded in 2017, so we're just over 4 years old as a firm. And being a boutique, we stay on the smaller side. So we have 9 employees, 6 are based in Ann Arbor. We have a principal in Norway, a senior advisor in Germany, and a colleague in Georgia as well that helps us with our financial operations. And our employees have roots from other firms. Some of us have worked together before at other prior consultancies. And ultimately, boutiques exist because we think there's demand for consultants with strong domain knowledge and expertise, and we've certainly found that's the case within aerospace, and so a lot of our staff come in with a previous background from other roles within the industry, like from manufacturers or airlines, and they apply what they've learned, their knowledge and skill sets, to our projects with clients.
When you talk, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say that I get asked a lot from friends and family about what consultants actually do, and there's a lot of different flavors of consultants, and it's a rather obscure profession. But in a nutshell, what I would say is that we work with leaders at companies from across the aerospace industry to help them grow and become better companies and organizations, and those options could lead to various avenues, like expanding into certain services, making strategic acquisitions or divestitures, or optimizing certain functions within an organization, and so forth.
Well, you just recently, I think, conducted a survey, didn't you, Mike, on the aerospace industry to gain a greater understanding of the vulnerability from COVID-19 environment. Let's talk a little bit about that. What did you find out?
Sure. So we conducted a broad survey mainly focused on North American suppliers, and we got 125 individual responses. The majority were from companies with less than $50 million in revenue and less than 100 employees, and nearly 80% or so were what we call Tier 2 or Tier 3 companies, that is, suppliers that make subcomponents and subassemblies, and not like the larger system-level integrators. And, there are a lot of tactics to deal with the COVID crisis and the impacts, but, one of the obvious ways to cope with it has been staff reductions, and almost half of the respondents, 44%, expect staff reductions of up to 30%, and that was in 2020.
Did the results surprise you?
Not necessarily, and we looked at how different types of suppliers were impacted too, and the ones that seemed to be the most impacted were aerostructures and interior suppliers. So aerostructures could include things like fuselage or wing sections that suppliers are making, but they're impacted for different reasons. The destiny of aerostructure suppliers tends to be more intertwined with certain aircraft platforms, and they don't tend to be as diversified as, say, an avionics supplier or other aircraft system supplier, who tend to have product across multiple platforms. And interior suppliers are also adversely impacted, but because interiors tends to be a discretionary spending area for airlines. So when times are good, the interiors gets a lot of attention, but when times are tough, it's one of the first areas to get cut. But what we've seen is the more diverse businesses have proven to be more resilient, and especially those that have been more focused on defense and maybe supplying a military platform like the F-35.
Where do you see the biggest challenges for the aerospace industry now, based on that results? What does it look like over the next couple of months?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. And, at the most fundamental level, air travel needs to begin a robust recovery for demand to trickle down into the need for new aircraft and repairs and spare parts. Right now we're in a little bit of a flat period where airlines have adjusted their fleets and their schedules, but right now everyone's just waiting for the vaccination rates to pick up. And while that program is underway and there's some light at the end of the tunnel, there are still some potential obstacles to vaccine distribution, new virus mutations, all the things we've seen in the news. And, it's also noteworthy that vaccine distribution is really uneven around the world right now. And the U.S. is actually leading the way. And most vaccinations are taking place in the West. And even Europe right now is stumbling in their vaccination rates. And outside of those developed regions, it could take years for some parts of the world to become fully vaccinated. Think parts of Africa or Southeast Asia, where the governments may have more difficult time to obtain large quantities of these vaccines. And, you could see some things like vaccine diplomacy becoming more of a reality. And we've done a lot of work adjusting our demand forecast to account for these factors. And our outlook is that air travel demand does not recover to pre-COVID levels until 2024, and production of new aircraft will not recover to pre-COVID levels until the mid to late 2020s. Some are more optimistic than us, but that's where we stand right now. And then there's also the aftermarket demand for repairs and spare parts, and we don't think that recovers until 2023 or 2024. And then for suppliers, including those in Michigan, what this inevitably means is that there's just too little work for too many suppliers right now, and the supply base will have to consolidate, and that can take the form of business failures. There could be mergers and acquisitions, and then potentially suppliers exiting the aerospace segment altogether.
I just have to believe that, so much of this changed so much for your organization or the industry itself over the last 12 months, and you had to deal with things that you didn't anticipate, very much like other businesses. But, having to deal with all of these issues now really must have kind of set you off from your original vision and mission and what you were trying to accomplish.
That's right. We had to pivot really quickly in March when everyone sort of realized within a very short period of time that the world was about to change. And we undertook a very in-depth study to examine how COVID will impact the industry holistically, starting bottoms up from how we thought different parts of the world would be impacted and different traffic flows, and then how that would flow down to the need for new aircraft and aftermarket services. So that's been a big part of our focus over the last 10 months or so, and it's really just, in some ways, sucked the oxygen out of the room. Right. But of course, it's a major focus for our clients.
Well, you are a member of the Aerospace Industry Association of Michigan. Why do you think that the association is so important, and what kind of impact is it having on Michigan?
Absolutely, and when we work with some other aerospace clusters, and when we look at the leading ones and the best-in-class clusters, the common thread is that they all have some sort of industry association to represent them. And prior to COVID, that was a valuable tool to help heighten their profile to the industry and tell their story. And when you would walk through the halls of a major industry conference or an air show like at Paris or Farnborough, you would see rows and rows of booths from all over the world with these different associations and economic development agencies. And so certainly that sort of representation has values. And now with this new reality with COVID, I think industry associations like AAIAM help band their members together so they can find common solutions to cope with today's challenges. And again, having worked with some other similar associations, the best ones also help facilitate ways for their members to act more as a collective group that provides a range of services to the industry rather than a disparate set of suppliers with no cohesive value proposition or identity. And organizations like AM help develop that identity and project that to the world.
What are the Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah. The last point was more industry associations like this also in developing clusters help give suppliers a legislative voice and inform state and local governments about their presence and priorities. And in a state like Michigan that's historically more focused on the automotive industry, that's also a valuable tool.
You bet. Well, as you talk about that, and you talk about your relationship with them, what are the unique services that you think that Aerodynamic brings to the association? What do you do that's a little bit different?
Sure. I mentioned at the beginning of this that we're a boutique, and the way we talk about ourselves is that we're narrow in our focus on just being focused on aerospace, but we're deep in our domain knowledge, whereas other firms, larger, more established firms may have a toolkit for a broad set of industries, but not necessarily with the same level of domain expertise. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. And I think with our size and our focus, that we're better positioned to work with suppliers deeper in the supply chain, and some of them may not typically engage consultants, and we can work with them. And I think we've worked with AIM before to profile the supply base in Michigan to help inform state and local lawmakers about how aerospace can be a viable industry for Michigan, and that complements the automotive industry and not in competition with it.
Yeah,
there's a lot of overlapping capabilities and footprint that can be leveraged. Sure.
Do you work with the University of Michigan as well? I mean, from a higher ed perspective?
A little bit. We recruit a lot from University of Michigan, being based in Ann Arbor.
Yeah.
It's a great talent pool, and it's a good problem to have, that in the sense that we almost have a hard time looking elsewhere at other universities. But we regularly go to give seminars and talks at the Aerospace Engineering Department at U of M. And like I said, we regularly recruit from that talent pool. So we're very much intertwined with that university, and our managing director is actually on the Industrial Advisory Board for the Aerospace Engineering Department.
Great, that's great. Where do you see the company going in the next 5 to 10 years, Mike?
We have to develop in some ways with the overall industry, and sometimes, like what this past year has demonstrated, we have to stay on our toes and adapt quickly. But I'd say overall we're aiming to continue building an enduring and respected aerospace consultancy, and I think that if we stick to our boutique roots and focus on thought leadership and practicing what we preach in terms of strategy development and providing excellent quality for our clients, that will always deliver dividends for us. And our business is ultimately highly based on relationships and trust. So we're always looking for ways to expanding that and strengthening those core values.
You are also an FAA licensed commercial pilot, aren't you?
That's right.
Have you been up? Have you been up lately?
I'm trying to get up as much as possible. I did recently get current again for my instrument rating, so I'm hoping when the weather gets warmer, I don't have to deal with ice anymore in Michigan. Then I can take some longer trips up to Traverse City and get out of the house a little bit.
Has the supply chain really been impacted just severely from the conversation that we had at the beginning of the pod? You talked a little bit about that, the damage it's done to the supply chain.
Yes, and again, some suppliers have been impacted differently. The ones that tend to be the most resilient are those with diverse revenue streams across different market segments. So, when we look at aerospace as a whole, we look at it, the 4 key market segments would be air transport, business aviation, military, and then civil helicopter. And, just because air transport has been, really hard hit by COVID, it doesn't mean all those 3 other segments have been equally impacted. And in fact, suppliers for business aviation might be surprised to see that production has not fallen as much for those aircraft, and the use of those aircraft has actually recovered more swiftly than airliners. And likewise, military and defense budgets have stayed relatively flat, and that's actually been a form of stimulus for the industry. There are some accelerating deliveries for fighters, and there's a continued need to invest in, by the government, to invest in those aircraft. So that's a relative source of stability.
Yeah, you know what? Our time went by pretty quick this morning, Mike. I want to thank you for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You bet. My guest today, Mike Stengel, Senior Associate at AeroDynamic Advisory. And I want to thank today's episode sponsor, Marketing Resource Group and the Aerospace Industry Association of Michigan. I also want to thank my supporting sponsors, Marketing Resource Group, Governmental Consultant Services, AF Group, the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, and the Fraser Law Firm. You can listen to all of my podcasts at connectwithkb.com. Until we connect again, go live your best life. I'm your host, Kristin Beltzer.